Salute. How y'all doing? My name is Derrick Williams. Shout out and respect due to my newest subscribers, Jason Buchanan and Miss Melissa Scott. I try to leave out all emotion and I simply go with logic and the science. At a time like this, emotionalism is something that we absolutely do not lead. We want to follow the science. Whether or not we can eventually stem the tide and right the ship of all the nonsense that's going on with regards to all the restrictions that are in place and people wearing masks for no reason, in my opinion. That story has yet to be told, but I think most people would like to know why stuff is the way it is and how did we get here. The title of this presentation will be called Gain of Function, an Offensive Biological Warfare Agent. And I'm just one man in the comment section on YouTube. I want to introduce to you a man that I have referenced many times. He goes by the name of Dr. Francis Boyle. This is a learned man and a lettered man, and one that, quite frankly, has all the answers you need with regards to how this virus came into being. And he's being interviewed by none other than Dr. Joseph Mercola. Dr. Mercola has been online since 1997. He is as good as it gets with regards to health and wellness. I will be dropping Dr. Mercola's link in the description box below, and I will also drop the link for this video that you can watch at your leisure in its entirety. All y'all take care. Greenville, Mississippi till I die.
Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health, and we're here today to continue the dialogue about the COVID-19 pandemic and what might have been the actual causal factors. We are joined today by Dr. Francis Boyle, who was a previous guest. Dr. Boyle is receives his law degree from Harvard, and he has 2 other PhDs there. He's a professor of international law at the University of Illinois currently, and he was responsible for drafting the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989. And he also serves as as an attorney for the Council for Responsible Genetics, which I hold an enormous prestige because they were one of the first organizations that really highlighted the concerns and the dangers of GMOs. So welcome and thank you for joining us, Dr. Boyle.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Dr. Mercola, and my best to your viewing audience. And I do look forward to our continuing dialogue about this matter, you from your area of expertise and me from my area of expertise.
Your training is in law, and you have no formal training in biology, but you've been involved in biological warfare agents for quite some time. So without any some of the criticism against our previous interviews that you have no formal training in virology, and so what is your expertise to comment on that? And I'm not challenging you at all. I just want to preempt some of the concerns that will come up because we're going really deep into a lot of the biology. So why don't you just briefly state that, and then we'll go into the science.
Well, for college, I went to the University of Chicago, which, as you know, is one of the top 5 universities in the country, if not the world. And there I took their bio-pre-med sequence, which was biochemistry, population biology, and genetics, and got straight A's. I was in there competing with all the University of Chicago bio-pre-med students for grades, and my biochem lab partner went to Harvard Medical School. And then I won the University of Chicago's Sigma Xi Award and Prize in Biology for my graduating year. They gave out 1 per year, and they had to make, usually it went to seniors, but in my case, they had to make a special exception because I was a graduating. So, yes, I'm not a scientist, but one of the reasons that the Council for Genetics, Responsible Genetics, asked me to get involved was that my knowledge in this field was well known to my life science friends there at Harvard, on the Harvard faculty, and that's how I got involved here. I had basic rudimentary training, actually very good training at the University of Chicago, and then my professors at Harvard in the life sciences, I guess they vouched for me. So when I was asked to join shortly after CRG was founded in 1983, I agreed to do so, and they asked me to handle their biological warfare work. I did not really get involved in their anti-GMO work. They had another law professor they worked with on that, and that was fine with me because all that biological warfare work was
more than enough.
More than enough to keep me busy. Although I did keep an eye on their anti-GMO work, and of course I fully agree. Indeed, it's interesting, Doctor, you might not know, but Monsanto, which, Frankenfoods, when I started out with my Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act to get it passed, I had a meeting with a top official from Monsanto, whose headquarters there is in St. Louis. And I met with him to explain that the Biological Warfare Anti-Terrorism Act was not designed to go after GMO food. And I wanted to assure him of that because I did not want Monsanto lobbying against me. The official from Monsanto said, we do not plan to get into biological warfare weapons work because this would tarnish our name brand. You don't want to eat Wheaties made with a biowarfare lab. Well, doctor, guess what? Years later, and as I speak today, Monsanto set up a BSL-4 laboratory in its corporate headquarters in St. Louis.
Oh my gosh!
So break down the building there for where they're GMOing your Wheaties. They are working on every type of hideous biological warfare work you could. That's a true story. So Monsanto has finally united Frankenfoods with Nazi biowarfare work. So you too can have some coronavirus on your Wheaties if you want to.
Well, let's be clear. There's no indication that they're working on coronavirus. But from our previous conversation, you made it really clear that from your viewpoint, the only purpose of a BSL-4 biological safety laboratory level 4 lab was a biological offensive warfare agents. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no, you're free to disagree with me, but I know of no legitimate scientific or medical reason for a BSL-4 or a BSL-3. None.
Okay, so let's go to the pandemic.
Well, by the way, I believe Monsanto was working on Ebola. So you can have Ebola sprinkled on your Wheaties if you want to. But I think that needs to get out to those involved in the anti-GMO food movement. And as you know now, Monsanto has been taken over by the unreconstructed Nazis there at Bayer.
That's right.
Doesn't surprise me at all. This is what we are up against, Doctor.
Okay, well, that's a tangential, an important but tangential discussion. There's a review here with COVID-19. So the primary one is that it is and you hear this all the time, but I think it just, because we're just overwhelmed and there's so much fear going on here that we tend to really not appreciate what this word means. But it is always called the novel coronavirus. I want to emphasize novel. Novel means new. means it has not been previously known to exist in the human species. That's what this means, novel coronavirus. So it never existed before. The existing and currently held view is that this was transmitted through animals, a term that's called zoonotic transmission, which you heartily dismissed in our last conversation. And we didn't really go into the details, but I think Nature that refuted that, and one of the authors was one of the people that we're going to be talking about who really started this and probably designed this whole virus over 10 years ago. I just want to, with that in mind, I'd like to go into a little detail in some of the documentation to establish that this is indeed an engineered synthetic virus that was not, and emphasize not, transmitted from animal species to the humans without a human intervention. So along those lines, there was a paper published by some of the physicians who first treated the coronavirus patients in China, and it was published in Lancet in January. And they showed that the patient zero, one who was believed to start the transmission, was nowhere near the market. And there were no bats even close to the seafood market, and at least 1/3 of the patients reviewed had no exposure to the seafood market. So most of the experts seem to use this as solid data to support that this was not zoonotically transmitted. And I wonder if you have any comments on that study.
Right. Well, Doctor, I'm not going to review. We had a 1-hour conversation the last time. I'm not going to go over that. But now, even if you're looking at mainstream news media, U.S. intelligence agencies are coming around to saying, yeah, we believe it leaked out of the Wuhan BSL-4 lab. But I did go through with you that article published by the University of North Carolina and the Wuhan BSL-4 lab virologists establishing without a doubt that this was SARS, which is a weaponized version of the coronavirus to begin with. It was given gain function capabilities, and the leading Wuhan scientists took it back there to that laboratory. I also went through the scientific article where the Australian Health Board, working with the Wuhan for virologists, DNA genetically engineered HIV into SARS. And they had that technology as well. So that is all verified in scientific papers. In addition, and you and I were going to discuss this, it seems to me that they took that back to the BSL-4 and they applied nanotechnology to it. The size of the molecules are maybe 120 microns, which indicates to me we are dealing with nanotechnology, which that's what you need to do in the BSL-4. Nanotechnology is so dangerous. People working with biological weapons nanotechnology, you have to wear a moon suit with portable air. Otherwise, it will kill you. We also know then that Wuhan BSL-4, one of the cooperating institutions was my alma mater, Harvard. And we also know that the chairman of the Harvard chemistry department, who was a specialist in nanotechnology, set up an entire laboratory there in Wuhan, where the reports are he specialized in applying nanotechnology to. So my guess is, based on what I've read in all the literature here, that they tried to weaponize all that together. And that is COVID, what we are dealing with now. So it's SARS, which is genetically engineered biowarfare agent to begin with. Second, it has gain of function properties, which makes it more lethal, more infectious. It has HIV in there. That was confirmed by the Indian scientists. We discussed that before. And it looks like nanotechnology, which is why it literally travels above the air. You have that MIT scientist who did a study and found out that it traveled 27 feet through the air. And that, I guess, was in lab conditions. So that, I think, is why it's so infectious. And that is what I believe we are dealing with here. I am not saying that, China deliberately released this, shooting itself, but it was clear they were developing an extremely dangerous, unknown biological weapon that, had never been seen before, and it leaked out of the lab. And as you see today in the Washington Post, or yesterday, U.S. State Department officials were already in there and warned back that there were inadequate safety precautions and procedures in that lab to begin with. And we also know that SARS has leaked out of other Chinese biological warfare labs. So right now, I believe that is what happened here. And let me conclude, and then we can have your thoughts on it. But that until our political leaders come clean with the American people, both at the White House and in Congress and our state governors, and publicly admit that this is an extremely dangerous offensive biological warfare weapon that we are dealing with, I do not see that we will be able to deal with it, COVID, to confront it, and to stop it, let alone defeat it.
Yeah, I don't share those views, but we'll have that discussion. And because it wasn't clear to me in our initial conversation, but as I started reading some of the literature, it really was shocking, because one of the primary investigators on that 2015 paper from the University of North Carolina was she, and I'm going to murder the pronunciation of her last name, Zengli. Zengli. But anyway, she actually published a paper in 2010 which essentially showed, that involved the weaponizing the SARS, because normally coronavirus in bats is not SARS. Now,
Correct, you are perfectly correct.
The infectious agent that is hitting this pandemic is called SARS-CoV-2. SARS meaning serious acute respiratory infection, and CoV for coronavirus 2. But the coronavirus is normally not a SARS. They manufactured this one to be, and as you said in this 2010, she's been doing this for 10 years. So the papers go back, put them in the references if people want to look at them. But then I also want to tie.
Let me just say, I agree with you. That is why I said SARS was a bioengineered warfare weapon to begin with. And that is what certainly at North Carolina and also with the Australian lab, they were trying to make it even more dangerous with the gain of function and the HIV. So I agree with you 100% on that SARS was a biological warfare to begin with. It leaked, and that is the origins of the SARS epidemic to begin with.